Good afternoon. I'd like to call the December meeting of the Board of Early Education and Care to order. We're excited to be here in Lowell today at CTI. I'd like to thank the entire team here for the hospitality today and welcome Kayumbo Kamawu, Chief Program Officer here at CTI, to welcome us. You can sit right at the table here. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Welcome all of you to Community Teamwork. My name is Kayumbo Kamau. I am the incoming Chief Program Officer here at CTI. We're really proud to host you at this main building of our Division of Child and Family Services. Now, if you're here for the tour, you had a chance to listen to some of the services that we provide here. Megan did write a few notes for me of a few things that I should highlight while I speak, but Megan being Megan and being very thorough, she used up all the notes. So I will just go ahead and say a few things here and there. So we do provide education and care here to approximately 1,400 children per year here at the center through a mixed delivery system that includes family child care, out-of-school time programs, infant and toddler care, preschool education, and of course, Head Start. Now, one thing that we're really proud of here at CTI, and also especially here at the Child and Family Services Division, is that we go beyond education by providing, essential services through a wraparound type of system where we're providing services to children and families that are in our care. So we're talking about transportation, nutrition services that includes those amazing cookies that we missed out on today, and of course the behavioral health supports. Again, it's our honor to host the board meeting today, and as we mentioned earlier, you're more than welcome to come back, make this a standing meeting if you have to, right here. The facilities are available to you. We are deeply grateful for our partnership with the Department of Early Education and Care. I think together we are making meaningful impact to the families that we serve, and we'll love to continue this partnership in a meaningful way. So on behalf of the children and the families that we serve, our educators, our senior leadership, the executive team, and the board of directors of Community Teamwork, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kayumbo. I can attest, I was here a couple months ago with the secretary and the governor, and the cookies were a big hit. We couldn't get people out of the kitchen, which actually embodies what we just saw in the tour, which is the commitment by your entire staff to make sure that children and families have what they need on a daily basis. And so thank you, and I know you're new to your role, so congratulations on your role as well, and thanks for having us today. I also want to acknowledge at the onset of the meeting that board members Dr. Kim Lucas and Jamel Lee have joined us today by phone. Today's agenda underscores the breadth of our mission and collaboration required to achieve our goals. We'll hear updates on the task force progress, consider critical decisions about financial assistance reimbursement rates, and continue our discussion on ensuring affordability, equity, and equality across the system. I want to acknowledge the hard work of the team, the thoughtful contributions from stakeholders across the state, and the vital perspectives of my fellow board members here today. Your leadership and insights are essential as we navigate the complex decisions ahead of us. With that, we'll move to our first order of business with comments from the Secretary. Mr. Secretary.
You might need to speak up a little bit just so folks in the back can hear. Sorry. I know that's not usually a problem for
No,
you,
I was going to say.
It is for me.
I'm
I'll stand up
for
straighter.
everybody else. That's not for me. I am actually.
Right.
Yeah, I got it. I'm going to, in the spirit of efficiency, Mr. Chair, forego my speaking time because we're going to be updating the board on the interagency task force. I do want to extend my thanks and appreciation to the Community Teamwork family for hosting us today. And again, it's my second time here. Really appreciate the work you do with and for families and for the community you serve.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We look forward to hearing about the task force with your colleagues. I'll hand it over to the Commissioner for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, and I just want to add my thanks very much especially to Megan Seabor, who gave us a tour and has been so welcoming and is leading efforts here to really make a deep and wide impact on the kids and families that you're serving, paying attention to the educators, making sure kids can get here, providing those behavioral and mental health services. We had a chance to tour the brand new Behavioral Health Center where they are really taking a public health approach to addressing the needs of our kids and families and our educators. And we couldn't be happier to be here today. And thank you for your leadership today and every day. A couple updates for the board I wanted to share today. We announced $4 million in large capital grants. This board has taken very important action every year to support the capital investments in our programs. We saw a beautiful new facility downstairs. I got to be here at the ribbon cutting, so we know that spaces that are designed around the children and the educators who use them make an incredible difference in the education and the feeling and the values that we are able to express. So $4 million in large grants, which is on top of $8.5 million that we announced earlier this year. And we are in the process right now of reviewing applications for our first ever Family Child Care Capital Grant Program that we are operating in collaboration with Mass Development under the Executive Office of Economic Development, pulling on our task force efforts. And I think we received 1,600 applications, and we have just over 5,000 licensed providers in the state. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of demand out there around capital investments. So this board took very important action to make sure that we were able to both support our larger capacity building grants and also continue our smaller grants that are providing improvements to spaces, making them more accessible and inclusive and greener across the Commonwealth. So the mix of capital investments that we're able to support now, we know we're not meeting the need, but it's bigger and broader than we've ever been able to do before. So proud to announce those $4 million in grants today. And congratulations to the recipients. We look forward to attending your ribbon cuttings when they happen. I also wanted to make sure people are aware of the scholarship program, our early education and care scholarship that we administer with the Department of Higher Education is open until January 15th. So please apply if you're interested. Similarly, and thanks to action by this board, our Career Pathways program is up and running for this semester, and there's openings in programs across all 15 community colleges as well as Urban College, who we partner with through the Career Pathways grants. So if you're interested in child growth and development or any other early education and care programming, we hope you will pursue an application there. Since the last time we met, we also celebrated, along with our colleagues at the Executive Office of Labor and Workforce Development, and we've just been joined by Secretary Jones here, Apprenticeship Week. And it was a really big year for apprenticeships for early education and care. Earlier in the spring, we announced 5 new early education and care scholarships, including one at the community group, where we announced those. The highest number, there were 25 apprenticeship programs announced that day. 5 of them were early education and care programs, and they are operating up and around the state. We also did $1.4 million in intermediary support to apprenticeship programs to support both our apprenticeship programs and our apprentices. And a really meaningful moment this year was also celebrating with 4 Kids Only, who has launched the first ever full-time apprenticeship program for after-school and out-of-school time staff, first in the country. So we're really proud of that work and being able to partner with them and support them in that work. Just reflecting back for a minute on the year we've had. Almost a year ago, we were all together kicking off the Gateway to Pre-K agenda with Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, and the commitment that this administration has shown to supporting the sector, whether it's increased affordability for families, greater stability for our programs, for our C3 program, and really supporting the early education and care workforce as a key investment in quality and capacity building. We've made progress across all of those fronts, and I'm really excited that we're going to hear from our task force chairs today to talk about what else is happening across state government to support early education and care. I feel really fortunate to be in Massachusetts at this time, and also reflecting on how grateful I am for the leadership of our secretary, who's made early childhood education the top of his list, and to this board, who has been here all year. We've made some complicated, difficult decisions, and I think I hear all the time from the field when I'm out at program visits, when I talk to educators, I talk to program directors, about how grateful they are for the leadership of this board, how much they feel that you recognize what's happening in the field and are taking actions to support that. So just reflecting on that, and some gratitude coming into the end of the year. Kicking off our first meeting of the new year, we will be back in Boston. It's January 15th at our Boston offices on Milk Street. So, and that concludes my updates.
Thank you, Commissioner. We're going to move to the public comment portion of the meeting. I'd like to call up Gillian Boudin. We'd ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. And I also, as Gillian comes up, want to acknowledge that the board has received public comment by email, and it has been distributed prior to the board meeting. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Good afternoon, Secretary Tutwiler, Commissioner Kershaw, Chair Pulsito, and EEC board members. I'm glad to be back here in front of you. Some of you are newer members since the last time. I think I was back in February of last year on Valentine's Day. I don't have any candy treats. Sorry. But I'm back again to talk about the Coordinated Family and Community Engagement Grant that is part of the Department of Early Education and Care. Just a little bit about myself. I have been part of the work that we now do with the Coordinated Family and Community Engagement Grant for over 27 years, and it's really near and dear to my heart in terms of the supports that it provides for the families and communities that I work with. I work with 5 very small rural communities: Irving, Leverett, New Salem, Wendell, and Shutesbury, out towards Western Mass. Our populations range from about communities of 900 to communities of a little over 2,000. So small in relation. I did submit testimony, so I won't read the whole thing, but I would just want to pull out a few key pieces and just highlight some points. With limited access to early care and education programs within our communities, we mostly have our public schools, which have public preschool programs. We have family child care providers and 2 center-based programs. That's it. So for 5 communities. Families really struggle with finding care that works for them. And our programs end up being a place where they end up. More and more what we are seeing is families who are working remotely. They may both be working remotely, and they're sort of tag teaming. One of them will bring a child out to a playgroup for the morning, and then they tag team with the other parent in the afternoon. And that's sort of a change that we've seen since the pandemic. But we're there for them and their child, and to provide enrichment and socialization opportunities, and to alleviate isolation, and with our trusted CFCE staff. We began a new program this year in a new library in Irving, and we are averaging like 18 to 21 children each Monday morning, which is very surprising. We were hoping we'd have enough to keep it going. So we partner with EEC in engaging families, connecting them to resources, and supporting their transition to early education in school. In our efforts to sustain and strengthen our capacity to serve families, it's become evident that additional financial support for CFCE programs across the state is urgently needed. I fully understand that currently in the political climate and in the financial climate that we have, we're uncertain about what funding will look like in the coming year or more. But I feel like it is time certainly for us to make a plan of how we can support the CFCE programs and funding. It has been over 10 years that we have received any additional funding. that our budgets have increased. Through shared communication of other CFC coordinators across the Commonwealth, we surveyed ourselves to find out what would we do if we had some additional funds for our programs. Workforce priorities are to support cost of living or pay increase for staff to retain staff. Many people reduce their time in order to make it work in the budget, or people move on because they need a different job that will continue to pay. Coordinators report that program stability priorities are to hire additional qualified staff to meet the needs of families. Follows with workforce priorities, and also to replace educational consumable materials in playgroups. We often rely on donations in order to meet those needs. Also, coordinators report that family access priorities are to hire bilingual staff, continue to staff family engagement and outreach events, and maintain or increase the playgroup sessions to meet the needs of families. And this will only strengthen CFCEs as a local point of access for our communities. We continue to be programs that are a local trusted source of support, warm handoffs, builders of relationships, and partners that can support EEC with family engagement and meeting the goals of the EEC's strategic plan. CFCs can help EEC meet their goals of family engagement and support. I just want to end with one comment from a family. I moved to Franklin County from out of state with a brand new baby. The isolation I felt was compounded by the rural setting with which I had no experience and the lack of family support. The CNC program, our program that we call it, provided someone to email and check in a baby welcome basket, access to programming for my young child as they grew. Without CNC, I would have certainly struggled with isolation and depression, and my children would not have had the advantages of powerful programming and playgroups, things that children living in more urban settings have easy and frequent access to, but which is all but denied to rural communities. So that's a parent in one of our small communities. But there's more, and I shared that with you, and I appreciate you listening today.
Thanks for sharing. Thanks for
Yeah.
being here. Anyone else here for public comment? Great. Moving on, we have before us the minutes of the November 13th, 2024 board meeting. Are there any additions, corrections, or edits to the minutes? Hearing none, I make a motion to approve the minutes of the November 13th, 2024 board meeting. Can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. The minutes of the November 13th, 2024 meeting are approved. And with that, we are going to move to our next agenda item, which is on the Interagency Early Education and Child Care Task Force update, and invite Secretary Jones and Undersecretary Stanton to the front table with Secretary Tutwiler. As the three of them get settled, I just wanted to offer some comments. Prior to the start of the meeting, we had a great tour here of CTI. And Megan, as you were talking, I was thinking about this particular agenda item as we talked about whether it be the Identigo location here to help make sure that the workforce has what they need on site to expedite their time from application to actually getting in the classroom, to the transportation needs, to the behavioral health needs, to the wellness needs of your workforce. It kept reminding me of this particular topic, that it is indeed a whole of government approach to ensure that this sector has what it needs to be successful. And we're grateful to the governor, to the secretary, and to the team in front of us here today for your leadership in ensuring that this conversation continues, and that we do look at every secretariat and every sector in government to ensure that we're doing what we can to make sure that children and families across the Commonwealth have what they need. So we are very grateful for your presence here today, Secretary Jones, Undersecretary Stanton. Thank you for taking the time and making the time to be here today, and I'll turn it over to the Secretary to kick us off.
Thank you kindly. Good afternoon. I have to admit, I've been on this board, and it's been a pleasure for now almost 2 years, and this is the first time that I have had this perspective.
We've been waiting for this moment.
You've been waiting
so,
for it, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm thrilled to be sitting here and having this perspective this afternoon to talk a little bit about the Interagency Task Force and update. I'm thrilled to be joined by Secretary Jones from Labor and Workforce Development, Undersecretary Stanton from Economic Development. Secretary Howe was pulled for another event. And we thought it appropriate for us to be here, the co-chairs of this work, at this moment, because we are very quickly approaching the 1-year mark of the task force, which is an important milestone, but also a point at which there is a deliverable, which I will talk about in just a moment. To start, we should be clear that this is part and parcel of the Healy Driscoll administration's vision around early education and care. The governor clearly understands the importance of the sector, the importance of the work that is done with and for young people, first and foremost, and the impact on their families. I did not pull this quote that's on the screen right now, but I think it says a lot and reminds me of something that I used to say frequently when I was a high school principal. I can't be successful unless you're successful, to my teachers and to my staff. And what Governor Healy is saying right here is that the success of the early education and care sector is critical for the success of the entire state. So it's really this vision that, and her direct call that's resulted in the work that the task force has engaged over the course of the past year. And again, really thrilled that we're doing this in partnered fashion with the co-chairs of this work, labor and workforce development and economic development. We've got some muscle memory in working with each other on the workforce skills cabinet, but really thrilled to lean into this work in collaborative fashion as we have over the past year. So we thought what we would do is just do a very brief historical, and I will take the lead on that and talk about where we've been, but also where we're going. And I'll invite my colleagues to say a little bit from their perspective as well. But formally, just about a year ago, in January of this calendar year, Governor Healy signed Executive Order 625, which called for the whole of state government to lean into supporting the efforts of the Early Education and Care Agency and this board in solving some of the really prevalent challenges that we know exist in the sector. I'm pleased to say that all 11 secretariats have been leaning in substantively to this work as the executive order calls for. But also you'll note at the very bottom, there's an expectation that we're engaging meaningfully with the field and with other a broad and diverse stakeholder group to really sort of identify solutions. The executive order does call for a formal effort over the course of 3 years, and I think I don't want to get ahead of my skis, but I've really enjoyed the collaboration over the past year and will be a little bit stubborn about releasing folks after 3 years. But the perspective, the expertise of folks who are coming from housing, who are coming from, you name it, transportation, who are coming from health and human services, has been monumental in our thinking over the course of the past year. The co-chairs got to work pretty immediately in getting organized, getting oriented, and we thought it important first to get anchored in a set of core values, the top of which is child-centeredness, making sure that as we engage this work, we are keeping the best interest of children at the fore of our thoughts. We absolutely want to be innovative and equitable and also results-oriented, right? This is not an effort to get anybody's name in the paper. It's really about being a significant support to the work that the agency is doing, the board is doing, because we know the impact and the importance of it. There are 5 priorities that are guiding our work. These are drawn directly from the executive order, and I'll just briefly touch on them. They call on us to sort of peer into the backyards of other states and other countries to see what's working there and having impact and bring that to bear on our thinking in the task force. We also are holding up the proverbial mirror in state government and thinking about how we can be better, more effective, more efficient, more collaborative in support of the work of the Early Education and Care Agency and this board. We clearly want to focus our efforts on challenges that we're all deeply familiar with in the sector, the workforce pipeline and retention, accessibility and affordability. And then finally, we want to bring to bear on these efforts all that belongs to the state in terms of real estate, in terms of land, to think about the issue of access, particularly where we know there are the most challenges. This is a timeline that this board has seen before, and anyone who had the opportunity to attend any one of the 14 listening sessions has seen. They have not seen it in as ornate fashion as this particular slide. Thank you to whoever did that. But just want to draw your attention to a couple of pieces of the timeline. Again, we began in January with the governor's executive order, got organized with the co-chairs. We kicked off the task force work substantively in March at Horizons, which was a great event. And I want to publicly thank the commissioner and her team, because really the first step in that kickoff meeting was to get all of the representatives from the 11 secretariats sort of foundationally understanding the the sector. We then moved from that work to the development of 5 working groups aligned with the priorities. And the months of May through July were the ones during which we engaged the 14 listening sessions, which I will say more about in just a moment. But I do want to call out those first steps between the months of March and July. We really hit the ground learning as opposed to running. The idea was to first learn and understand, and then engage substantively with the field to understand their experience, their ideas, their expertise, and bring that to bear on our thinking before we even start to have conversations about solutions. After the listening sessions, we pivoted to sense-making, sort of understanding all that we learned during the previous months, which are going to show up substantively in a report that is due soon, like now. And this is a report that will reflect all that we learned over the course of the past year, what we heard from the community, what we learned in terms of the research of other states and other countries, what's working well, and also pivot to some recommendations for the governor to consider about the path forward. The idea is to pass that first to her, which will happen really soon, and then make it public. Did I say soon on that report? Okay, I do mean that. I want to just briefly lift up the 14 listening sessions. We've talked about it pretty substantively here at the board, but I will say for me personally, that was a transformational experience, having the opportunity to hear directly from providers, hear directly from families, hear directly from people who are working either in or close to the field about the challenges, but also their ideas around what we should be thinking about. You can see here that we were very intentional about making sure that we sort of got to, in person, the various regions of our state. There were 5 virtual sessions as well, one held in Spanish, and then over 300 submissions of written comments and ideas through survey, which we also are bringing to bear on our thinking about the path forward. And so what did we learn? There's a lot of verbiage on this slide. I'll just call out a few things, none of which will be a surprise to the board. The challenges around affordability, the statewide challenge around access, and as you already know, there are deeper issues around access as you visit certain regions of the state. One thing that I'll point out that was lifted up in every single one of the 14 sessions, the challenge around the mental and behavioral health of children. And this topic was raised really in two ways. One, from the standpoint, obviously, of concern for children and their well-being, but also in the conversation around staffing retention. There are lots of concerns about the experience of staff, feeling ill-equipped to manage some of the behaviors and ultimately deciding to leave. I'll call out one other bullet point here, and that is the expansion of universal access to preschool. I'll say one benefit of, among many, of the listening sessions was having the opportunity to really signal to the community the vision around universal access to preschool. The vehicle for that is the Commonwealth Preschool Partnership Initiative, which is a mixed delivery strategy, which is what we're really intending to leverage as the path forward, which I thought was good because there's a lot of concerns about what universal pre-K actually means. So we had that opportunity to sort of dispel that, but it's here because it was lifted up as a concern that we heard pretty frequently over the course of the listening sessions. As I mentioned before, a big piece of this also involved a research effort to understand what's happening in other states and what's happening in other countries. There will be, the learnings from that effort are reflected in the report pretty substantively. We also take a moment to acknowledge some pretty substantive steps that we've taken forward already in this state. C3, which actually could have been in the feedback section on the feedback slide, because we heard a lot of praise and appreciation for the solidification or the permanency of that program, the work around financial assistance, again, the Preschool Partnership Initiative, and then the task force itself, which I can say with some degree of confidence, there's not another anywhere else in the country that looks like the one that's here in Massachusetts and that is engaging in the way that the one here in Massachusetts is, which is something that we should celebrate. Clearly, again, the notable increases in investment in the early education sector is worthy of note. I am no math, okay, I was gonna mention a mathematical statistic that I already figured out. I'm not just figuring it out on the moment, but that's about a 53% increase between fiscal years 22 and 25. That's amazing, and a place that we should sort of stop and celebrate. But if I went back to the previous slide and talked about the issues that were lifted up around affordability, accessibility, the issues related to the pipeline, there's clearly still more work to do, and we are committed to that in this task force. I'm going to pause and turn it to my colleagues to invite them to share their perspective thus far. Secretary Jones.
Well, thank you so much, Secretary Tutwiler, and to the board for the opportunity to reflect on really what's been a full year of engagement within this sector and in partnership with Commissioner Kershaw and so many dedicated stakeholders. So I appreciate that we can kind of conclude the year with this reflection point. I would say throughout the year, but most especially from the 14 sessions, it was really an opportunity for that listening, but also the learning that Secretary Tutwiler referenced. And for me, I thought it was really valuable. While we know there are some things we were already doing, as Commissioner Kershaw has mentioned, registered apprenticeship, and I was appreciative that that is a tool in our toolbox to lift up the workforce. It was also a huge learning opportunity to realize the challenges in building that pipeline in more real feedback that we were hearing from the field, but also some of the challenges in growing the sector as well, and some things that I think were highlighted, including just recognition of early childhood educators as educators, and that feeling that educators carry with them. And that's low-hanging fruit. We can recognize how important this profession is. They're helping to prepare our youngest learners, and we deserve to treat them with the same kind of respect and professionalism that we provide all educators. And that was something that really stood out to me during many of the listening sessions, and I think is relevant as we move forward in the work that's ahead in the next couple of years. I also recognize something that I think was very apparent. We want to build the workforce for our early childhood educators, but it's also not lost on me how important this is as infrastructure to support our broader workforce, regardless of what industry someone may work in, regardless of what shift they may show up to work. many people across Massachusetts in every single region of the state, households depend on childcare, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir right now, but it's so important as we think about the creative ways that we can take this whole of government approach, because it is not just about building the workforce. It is engaging with industry. It's thinking about other resources like transportation, healthcare, and other benefits, housing stability, and all of those pieces that will make it whole in supporting the workforce, supporting more accessibility, and making sure this infrastructure is key for our broader network of Massachusetts workers and businesses. And I think standing up and making our communities stronger, as the quote reflected early on in Governor Healy's remarks. So that's just a few thoughts initially, but happy to share more as well.
Thank you all for having me today. I said to Secretary Foster earlier, so we're talking about giant chocolate chip cookies, and I got to talk to some preschoolers. It's making me question if I'm in the right secretariat. I'm like full of joy, just getting to spend a little time with preschoolers before. So what's been interesting about this effort for me, and through the economic development lens, is that the year prior, the state underwent our economic development listening sessions in the lead up to creating what is now the Mass Leads Act, which was signed into law a few weeks back and is a $4.3 billion investment in the Commonwealth in life sciences and climate tech. And we also had a series of listening sessions. And at every listening session, we would hear, from small businesses, from rural businesses, from immigrant-owned businesses to our largest biotechs and climate tech companies, that you cannot have a successful economy if every member can't participate, which is so often women and men who are debating saying, do I go back to work? Or can I afford to pay for childcare? Can the schedule work for me? Is there access? And so for us, it was very eye-opening to be in these economic development listening sessions and hearing from the industry side of what a barrier to entry it is for workforce, whether it's in the most affluent parts of our state, our gateway cities. It was the same across the board. Challenges of how am I going to get my kid to school? Does the child care align with my work schedule? For so many business leaders, do we bring child care in-house? How do we make this work? And then flash forward a year later, being on the other side of the table, listening to providers saying, I don't know how long I can do this for. How is this going to work? Families have more need than we can provide. And it really brought, I think, a full picture of you cannot have a successful economy in Massachusetts if you do not have a successful, equitable, affordable childcare system. It's just not going to work. Whether it's our smallest businesses, our barbers, our nail technicians, our healthcare providers, our public safety professionals who work difficult schedules, how is it working for families? And on a personal note, it's been an interesting time because I have a 1-year-old, I have a 13-month-old. So when this process started, I was home on parental leave, trying to figure out how I was going to go back to work and balance having a little person at home and the demands of our job. And we're very lucky. We have all sorts of resources, but hearing parents and providers throughout the summer was so meaningful to really understanding the work that we're doing in economic development, where the state is putting its resources and how we leverage our economic development bill to really support all facets of the economy, which includes having this childcare system be working. So I was very thankful to be part of the effort, and I'm always thankful for Secretary Tutwiler's leadership. We're very lucky to have him here in the Commonwealth. Same with Secretary Jones, but it's a real reflection of the Healy Driscoll administration that this is not just an education-based initiative, that it's going across the board.
Would it be unprofessional if I said, see, I told you? Okay, see, I told you. Thank you both. And it has been just a real pleasure working with you, working alongside you in this effort. We're just getting going and supporting the work of the board and supporting the agency. So just quickly, as I mentioned in the outset, we are very quickly approaching the end of the first year of 3 years of the executive order. I mentioned that report that is coming very soon, first to the governor, lieutenant governor, then will be released publicly. And then beyond that, I think I can say that The report is organized in sort of now and next kind of orientation in terms of action steps. And you can see here that year 2 and beyond really involves taking those first steps. Some of it's diving deeper on things that are already happening. Some of it involves turning some new stones. Some of it involves exploring different pathways forward. But the report will outline that, and then it's our intention to get going with that in the year 2 of this executive order. Also, it might involve year 2 a little bit of restructuring of the task force. Right now, there are 5 groups that are organized around the priorities. The step 2 might involve some shifting there. And then there's one thing that I want to point out, and I don't see which, the second to last bullet that I think is really important. The report will come out. It will first validate the voices of the field that we heard, or from the field that we heard, the things that we learned over the course of the past year. It will articulate some now and next steps. But that doesn't mean that we're not open to new ideas and new ways of thinking. We're continuously going to stay in that orientation of, is there a better way? Is there another way? And so just want to make sure that I lift that up in closing out our presentation. Are there questions that we can answer?
What I thought we'd do is maybe allow the commissioner to offer a few comments
Please.
from her experience with this process, and then open it up to the board for some comments and questions. Does that work?
That sounds awesome.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I can't express my gratitude to the secretaries and their teams for the work over the last year. And I think there's been an incredible amount of learning, and that I think we should be very proud of that being what we've done for the first year. So, for our Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development to deeply understand the needs of the early education and care workforce and be thinking about the resources that are available within the formal workforce system to leverage on behalf of the early education and care sector, and for our Economic Development Secretary and her team to really look at our child care and early education programs as businesses and to be thinking about how we support their business needs, while also being cognizant that we are the workforce behind the workforce. So in order to achieve all the goals of both secretariats. But it's also been amazing to sit with our colleagues from outdoor recreation who are like, we got stuff to offer early educators. And our Department of Transportation who's like, we can paint different, we can think about regulations differently or paint different lines on streets around our early education and care programs and treat them like schools. And our Health and Human Services Secretariat thinking about how the roadmap for behavioral health needs to be expanded to really think about early education. And even our colleagues in education thinking about higher education partnerships as well as our K-12 partnerships around children with special needs and others. So conversations that we all have been having, but now I feel like a lot of the themes and the work from the task force have focused on kind of, I would say, a reiteration and affirmation of the work that this board and agency has been doing over the last several years as we think about the early education and care system, making it more accessible and more dignified, making it more affordable, going deeper into the areas around our workforce efforts and our credentialing, thinking about C3 and making that permanent and understanding it. But now we have an opportunity to look out across the rest of the state and across the rest of the resources in state government and bring those resources into the system too. So I think this year of learning and hearing from the field has been incredibly valuable, and we have identified some really promising areas for development, supporting what's happening already at the agency and within the system, and then exploring resources across the other secretariats that could really leverage new opportunities for the early education and care field. And I'm really looking forward to years 2 and 3, and however you hold us along, yep. Secretariat. I think yep. when you call, they come. Yep. So again, I wanted to thank you all and looking forward to the work ahead together.
I'll just add some comments. First, thank you. This is really exciting work. I think there were two comments that really, I think, created an equation in my head that we need to reconcile, which is Secretary Jones, you talking about, really it's about the infrastructure to support a broader workforce, right? We work every day to try to support the early education workforce, but it is bigger than that. And it is also in the listening sessions hearing about providers that are tired and burnt out. And we need to reconcile that, right? And I think the fact that we've got leaders in the Commonwealth that are trying to reconcile that equation should be a really proud moment, I think, for where we are as a Commonwealth. Because I don't think citizens across the Commonwealth think of us as this department or that. They think in a whole of government approach. And so, this is a perfect example of how we're meeting people where they are. And, the values of innovate, child-centered, equitable, and results-oriented sounds like a pretty good day's work. And so really looking forward to the now and next. I think I heard you say subtly that there'd soon be a report. I think that was... But,
Got it.
But I do think because people are burnt out. And so we do need to act now while we think about what's next over the next couple of years. And so I know I'm anxious to see those reports because just even today on the tour here at CTI, when you look at the behavioral and mental health needs of not only the students that teachers experience, but the teachers themselves, right? And what they need to be successful. And I'm just a believer in engaging experts that do this every day. If you want to talk about early education, there's a room full of experts here. And there's a lot of knowledge around mental health and behavioral health, but we need more of those voices and more of that thinking at the table. And I think the work around the apprenticeships is a perfect example of that. Like we're shifting the way people think about apprenticeships, right? It's not just your standard, labor apprenticeships. We're thinking about it differently around training and development and letting people kind of move up the ladder. And so as we think about the now and next, I am just curious if you could give us a prelude a little bit of maybe some examples that, that excite you about what we may be able to do in the near future.
So if you recall, Mr. Chair, from that, well, actually, no, even right here. The report needs to go to the governor and lieutenant.
I tried.
Okay. Yeah.
I tried.
First, and then we would be thrilled to come back and talk about the now and next.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Questions, comments from the board?
I just have a comment.
Yeah.
Thank you again. And this is great happening at the state level. I mean, this is going to create an awareness at the state level of that it takes more than the Department of Early Education and Care to just figure out how to have a healthy early education and care field, and for everybody else to figure out how this department and the field contributes to a healthy economy and basically be the workforce of the workforce as well. I don't. We know that, but I don't know that everybody else does. I'm hoping that in the long term too, this is happening at the state level, and I'm hoping a little bit of that is happening in Lawrence, but I'm hoping in the long term there is awareness in different municipalities to have their own task force to cover gaps that will still exist for that specific community. Every community is different, and I think that's the next step. I mean, I think it's on municipalities themselves to take accountability for having a healthy economy and for having a healthy early education system that caters to their own residents. Because, I mean, I myself in Lawrence, I see it. Like we have our own unique needs, and we got to try to solve for those, not at the state level, but at the local level. So I'm thinking maybe long term we can figure out, okay, how can we have some sort of a network of municipalities solving their own issues as well, because it can't happen in one place.
I think we were all nodding our heads with enthusiasm for that idea. Just as an observation, looking back on the 14 listening sessions, the vast majority of attendees were coming from the region. So if you were in Worcester, there was representation, in Greater Worcester, the central region. And so I think there is that kind of existing network, and I sensed it as well in some of the communities where people knew each other in the room or didn't know each other, or then realized that they should know each other. And so there's probably some opportunities in thinking about lifting up the communities, their talent and thought leadership within the communities, and then recognizing that local flavor that may be relevant as we move forward. But I appreciate you lifting that up.
I can't take the credit for that. Obviously, there's a little bit of that happening in Lawrence, and the commissioner actually had a really good conversation with me, recognizing that this is happening here. This is like a mini version of that task force in here. So it kind of, I'll give her the credit as well. So.
I mean, we're three former municipal officials, right? We've all worked in cities or towns, and so I think part of the beauty of this is that you have people that believe and understand the power of local government. It really can go a long way on getting things done.
That's right. Yeah. This is the momentum that the field got after the crisis as well.
And recognition, too.
Yes.
I know Dr. Lucas is on the phone and has a comment. Let's see if we can.
Yes, thank you. And thank you all for the accommodation of being able to call in. I just wanted to say thank you to all three of your secretariats and to the governor once again for pulling this task force together, really pushing through and being swift with this work. I teach in a policy school, and one of the things that I let my policy students know is that early childhood policy is actually every kind of policy. And so it's great to see that recognized in the work and in your even own personal experiences with working with the task force and going out to all of our communities. I'm looking forward to seeing, as Secretary Tutwiler mentioned, the possibility of reconfiguring and understanding just how broad early childhood policies are, maybe even beyond your three secretariats. And so curious about what that looks like and excited to see how that pans out with the report when it's released. The second thing I have to say is, in my own experience with the listening sessions, I was, I think similarly blown away by the number and amount of folks across the board and across from families all the way to early educators, all the way to folks who deliver and support wraparound services and advocates around what the issues are in the area. But I was also blown away by the amount of solution that people brought to the table as well. Some really practical, some of them very easy to me, all right, solutions that are feasible and implementable, and some that will take truly the whole of government and beyond. And I'm looking forward to seeing those solutions uplifted from the ground into this report as well. I think combined, us and the folks who are in the field will try to really improve this the childcare situation and the early childhood situation for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions from the board? I'll just one of the takeaways here was the high level of engagement, I think, from the business community, philanthropy, different stakeholders. And I think a lot of folks that don't get up every day like this team thinking about this are always asking how to do that. So I'm hoping also that this report is also a blueprint for them, right? To say like, these are actually ways that we can maybe help plug in and help support some of these recommendations as well, so that it really does start to trickle down, I think, to a local level on ways that, the entire community can participate. And so really looking forward to that. And with that, I'll just say thank you. I know there's Secretary Tutwiler has to be here, but Secretary Jones and Undersecretary Stanton, thank you for making the time to be here today. I know there's lots of demands on your time, but it means a lot, and I think it shows the commitment of the entire administration, from the governor and lieutenant governor down, for you to be here today to share your experience with this task force over the last year, and hopefully you have a lot of great outcomes to celebrate in the future.
Okay. Mr. Chair, can I just express my thanks again to the co-chairs and then publicly to all the other representatives who are leaning into this. I have been inspired by the enthusiasm, by the idea generation. It has been a real pleasure to engage with the broader secretariats. I'll also say Secretary Tutwiler gets to be here, not has to be here.
Fair.
Yeah.
Good point. And just in the service of gratitude, and Dr. Lucas mentioned it, the hundreds of people that participated in the listening session. Thank you to them, because this is one of those opportunities where I think the voices of the people across the Commonwealth, hopefully in this report, people will be able to see their voice in that and how we're going to make that actionable, and that's very rewarding, I think, for all of us to be a part of. And so thank you to those who took the time to do that. So a lot of gratitude.
Thank you.
And with that, we're going to take a quick 10-minute break. Thanks.
Thank you.
For our last agenda item, I'll turn it over to the commissioner to tee it up, and I want to thank Paul, Ashley, and Amy for joining us today.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll have each of our presenters introduce themselves as they kick off their presentation, but just a few words of context. We're very fortunate through the FY25 budget to have been appropriated $20 million and then an additional 2.5 for increasing rates of reimbursement for child care financial assistance. As many of you will recall, we have had pretty significant rate increases over the past several years, and we'll talk a little bit about the history of that. And probably most meaningfully for this board is the action you took last January to implement a $65 million rate increase for the first time ever, informed by the cost of care. And that proposal not only increased rates across the board for all providers, but also made a number of structural changes and reforms and addressed a number of longstanding inequities across the rate system. Really proud of that work that the team did and the support of the board in taking those actions. And we have seen really meaningful outcomes from those rate increases in terms of increased access to infant care, additional providers who are interested in participating in the child care financial assistance system, increases in salaries, and supports at programs as a result of these really, really essential increases. We do not have that same level of funding this year, but the team has been working very hard to put together a proposal and some options for the board to consider that would enable us to really continue that important reform work around child care financial assistance, while also recognizing that costs have gone up for everybody across the field and everyone. So what we're going to do today is just to walk back a little bit to the November board meeting, review with you the updated cost, just a summary of the findings of the cost study that we closed out the last meeting with, give a little bit of context for this rate increase. As always, the agency is under some level of direction and constraints in how we implement a rate increase. And then we're going to walk you through sort of the options that we would like the board to consider. We are not asking for a vote today so that the board has the opportunity to consider these options and also receive feedback from our stakeholders as we consider action after the new year. And with that, I want to just really recognize that when I first reviewed the work that this team had done, I was just incredibly blown away by the thoughtfulness, thoroughness, that the commitment of the agency to continue the reforms and to do it in a way that provides information, evidence-based action to both this board and also to our field and staff. So I want to thank you all for your excellence and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's great to be before the board again. Nice to see everyone. And maybe we can just start with some quick introductions. Amy Checkaway, Senior Associate Commissioner for Policy, Research, and Data Analytics.
Hi, everyone. Ashley White, Director of Research.
Good afternoon, Secretary, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board. Paul Ward, Senior Budget Analyst.
So we just want to begin by saying that this has been, as most things are at EEC, an enormous team effort. The team, which is much bigger than those three of us sitting before you today, has been working on and thinking about this since late in the summer. So it's been 3 to 4 months in anticipation of knowing that we would be bringing forward some options to the board. And from the EEC side, I especially want to thank Ashley White for her thought partnership and leadership overseeing and coordinating this work. Project Manager Leah Jack, who is not with us today, but who was before us last year, who is taking a much-needed vacation for making sure that we hit the ground running this year, and for spending a bunch of time actually jumping in to help with analysis and running different scenarios, flagging really important questions along the way. Paul Ward for his analytic support and insights from our budget team, and research analyst Caroline Connolly for her management support and keeping the trains on the tracks. I also want to acknowledge the ongoing leadership of Tyrese Nicholas, who is, I think, behind me or was before, for her leadership to continue to improve family access and engagement to our system. Adrienne Murphy and her data analytics team, Crystal Lanton, Catherine Harville for their leadership and support from the fiscal and operational perspectives. So after all of that, we can hop right into the meat of it. This slide may look familiar, but really think it's important to always start with the what of what we are doing and why we are doing it. So as you all know, and we have talked about extensively, a very important aspect of the child care financial assistance system is the reimbursement rates that the state pays to help defray or reduce the cost of child care for families. Why are child care financial assistance rates so important? Well, for families, rates provide much needed direct financial assistance to increase low-income and vulnerable families' purchasing power in the market. This assistance provides families with access to programs that they likely would not have been able to access and afford otherwise. For programs that serve families participating in the child care financial assistance system, our rates impact program revenue, financial stability, and the extent to which they're able to invest in staff and quality improvement. And in terms of our current rate structure, we were able to, as you know, with the board's support and leadership, able to make some transformational changes to our rate structure last year. EEC continues to pay a per child per day rate that is based on a program type, a child's age, and where they live in the state. With the significant changes to our rate structure that was in part informed by our cost research last year, we were able to simplify our rate structure so that regions of the state with similar costs have the similar rates. And finally, I just want to acknowledge that reimbursement for programs the EC contracts with to serve families in our child welfare system, Department of Children and Families, young parents, and families experiencing homelessness. That includes both the standard daily base rate by program type, age, and region, as well as additional reimbursement to support administrative costs and support services.
Amy, can I ask you to just speak up a tiny bit?
Yes.
Thanks.
There's a fan on.
Yeah,
over
there's
here,
some white
so it's
noise
not
going
you.
on.
Yeah.
Loud up here, yeah.
So we thought it would be helpful just to put some historical context about funding that has been appropriated in the state budget over the past 6 years, including the current one for increases to child care financial assistance rates. Commissioner, I don't know if you want to add anything further specifically about this topic.
We can talk about it when we get to the specific line item language too of what's been included. But I think it's really important to recognize that we have had an opportunity to increase rates over the last several years significantly. The last 2 years at $60 million, and actually that ended up being close to an $80 million increase to be inclusive of family child care, and then the $65 million last year. I think part of the important context is, as our caseloads have increased and as our rates have gone up, how far 20 million can get you it changes, right? So back in 2020, on a much smaller caseload and on a lower rates, 20 million might have gotten you a lot more funding as a proportion of the base rate. And so we are fortunate to be in the situation we are, that we have expanded the number of children that we're serving, and our rates have increased. But that means a $20 million rate increase sort of no longer goes as far as it might have. So when we get to the options, you'll see it ends up being a fairly modest increase, regardless of which option the board decides to choose.
So where have we been recently? As I started to say, last fall, EEC and the board used findings from both the 2022 market rate survey study and the cost models to inform increases to child care financial assistance rates and transformative changes to the rate structure, thanks to generous support from the legislature. As you likely recall, this included an across-the-board increase, consolidation of rates from 6 to 3 to address geographic inequities, and targeted increases to increase rates that were further away from the cost of care. As a sort of note, moving into consideration of our options this year, I just wanted to share that last year's resources allowed us to increase center-based rates to 81% of the cost of care and move our lowest rates from 56% to 72% of the cost of care, and that was based on 2022 data.
We've eroded.
So I just wanted to speak briefly, maybe I'll stay on that slide. The commissioner mentioned we're also really committed to continuing to learning and tracking the effects of the recent rate increases. EEC is fortunate to be partnering with a research team from Boston University in collaboration with Brandeis University, with support from a federal grant to examine whether and how rate changes affect program participation in the child care financial assistance system, whether and how rate changes affect families' utilization of care, and if there are differential effects of rates on equity and access to subsidized care. One of the members of the team from Brandeis presented some of the initial findings from focus groups that they conducted in the spring at the EEC Advisory Council meeting last week. Feels like a long time ago already. And just wanted to share a couple sort of key takeaways with the board as well. So one, many participating programs were very appreciative of the new higher rates, especially for those whose reimbursement rates are now much closer to their private pay prices. So that is good news. Although many programs appreciated the rate increases as a step in the right direction, many, and in particular programs that are not currently participating in the child care financial assistance system, also indicated that rates would need to be at or close to their private pay prices for them to either start to participate or participate more in the child care financial assistance system. So that is just a bit of qualitative data that we wanted to share today, and I wanted to also let the board know that this team is actively engaged in some quantitative impact analyses as well right now, which is going to use longitudinal data to assess the impact of the rate increases on programs' participation in the child care financial assistance system. So as this grant continues, look forward to continuing to share what we are learning, and not only share it, but also apply it to decision-making moving forward. Also wanted to note that we have been also using our own capacity to continue to track key metrics, as you know. And although we can't draw a causal link here, just pulled some data on child care financial assistance participation, and that is, in this case, defined by programs who have either a voucher agreement and or a contract with the EEC. And in March of 2024, participation was 62% of programs in our system, in our formal system. And as of today, participation is now up to 68%. So that's a 6% increase just as of late. Again, hopefully in part due to our rates being more supportive, as well as other things that are happening to better support the system.
And for a very long time, it was just participation among our licensed early education and care programs hovered right around 50%. So the 68 is quite a significant increase. And we would certainly attribute that in part to the rate increases, also C3, which is incentivizing participation. And for the short time while we had it, the pilot that made child care financial assistance available to staff working in early education care programs also required a program that wanted their staff to have that to sign a voucher agreement. So we've been working in sort of across avenues to increase those who might, to make our system more attractive for providers. And it's been working.
I thought you were raising your hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ashley. So this calendar year, EEC has continued to make progress on understanding the cost of care. As a former project manager, I always have a timeline in my head and wanting to see where we are compared to where we hope to be. So as I know the board is aware of, in January 2024, Massachusetts received approval from the federal government to formally use a cost-based alternative methodology versus market rates to inform reimbursement rates moving forward. As a next step, as part of that pre-approval, EEC is required to update and refine its cost models and use them to inform adjustments to child care financial assistance rates, which we will fortunately have the opportunity to do over the next few months, thanks to the resources available in the state budget for a rate increase. As you also know, and as the team was able to present directly to you last month, EEC contracted with the American Institutes for Research, known as AIR, which is an external research firm with deep expertise in both early education and care and cost modeling, in May to update, refine, and expand our cost methodology and our cost models. Our pre-approved alternative methodology and our current Child Care and Development Fund, or CCDF, state plan commits EEC to implementing rate adjustments that are informed by our updated estimate of the cost of care by mid-2025. We actually committed to spring 2025 because we're always a little bit ambitious. And I am happy to say today that it appears we're on track to meet that milestone. And as part of this process, both because we're eager to share what we're learning and also as part of the federal approval process, there will be a final report summarizing the findings from the cost work that has taken place this fiscal year, as well as how the cost of care methodology is being used to inform rates. And we hope that will be complete and published by sometime in the spring. So, I am not the team from AIR. If they're watching, I will do my best to put on that hat. And I think given the fast pace of the presentation of that they were able to make at the November board meeting, but also for board members and for the public today, we thought it would just be helpful to provide a really quick recap of some of the key findings from AIR's work to update our cost model and some of what they've learned. So again, these next few slides are the same slides that were included in the November presentation that really are a summary of the work. As a reminder, just in terms of what cost models are, since we know this is a fairly nuanced and complicated sort of topic to understand and want to continue to do our best to really help everyone understand sort of what the work is that is happening and how it is going to be used, and also continue to get input and engagement on this work. The cost models enable us to ultimately estimate, and estimate's an important word, the per child and per program cost to operate a child care program by different program types, by different geographic regions, by the ages of children served, and by other program characteristics. It's important to always keep in mind that the cost models really do not represent the unique, and probably can't represent the unique configuration of every program, but instead assume to represent a typical classroom for a center-based program and staffing configurations of early education and care and after-school and out-of-school time programs. The cost models are really intended to be used to inform state-level funding and policy decisions, including but not limited to our child care financial assistance rates. So we have begun to use the cost models to inform some of the adjustments to the C3 formula, and over time, the cost models really present an opportunity to continue to inform, again, decision-making across all of the funding that is available to the early education and care system. AIR's work this fiscal year is divided into two phases. The first phase is focused on really revisiting the original cost model that was developed based on 2022 price or cost information, and making adjustments where appropriate and updating all of the inputs in the cost models to 2024 prices using a variety of data sources. The findings from phase one were presented last month and are informing the adjustments and increases to CCFA rates and the options before you today this year. I do want to note that phase two, which is beginning shortly, is going to focus on further refinements to the model assumptions and structures. The AIR team has done an amazing amount of work in a short amount of time to really do a complete update of the cost models that we had fortunately already developed. But there is definitely continued work that we are really looking forward to partnering with them on and to getting more extensive input and feedback from the field over the course of the next 7 months or so. So some top priorities for this work will include further focusing on school-age care, exploring informal care, refining the aspirational cost model, which is the cost model that focuses on what we would want programs to be able to do and how we want to sort of serve and support both families and educators in the future. School-age care, I already said that, estimates, and also pretty importantly, exploring further costs associated with providing more comprehensive services. As I already said, engagement with key stakeholders has been and will continue to be critical. So as the AIR team shared with you last month, they have really been focused on updating all of the cost models, but primarily as part of this first phase, our center-based current cost of care model and our family child care specific cost model, which is really a hybrid of current costs and for many more aspirational compensation. And again, the goal of that was to be able to have more updated models to use to inform the FY25 rate increase. In addition to updating prices in phase one, the AIR team also conducted a thorough review of all the data sources available and brought in some new data sources as they discussed further. And they made some what I would call sort of tweaks or near-term adjustments where appropriate. This slide is really the sort of highest level key takeaways from the first phase of cost work this year. And I think the big headline here is that there have been notable cost increases from 2022 to 2024 for programs and for all of us and for certainly for families across the Commonwealth. The per child cost for center-based care using the cost model estimates increased between 14 and 26%, depending on the age group and region over the course of those 2 years. The cost per child for family child care programs also increased between 12 and 9%. As the AIR team, I think, noted last month, while costs did vary and do vary across regions, it was not to a significant degree, and at this juncture, I will say it was not to a significant degree to the extent that the data still seems to support the current CCFA, or Child Care Financial Assistance Rate, structure that was adjusted and put into place last fiscal year, but we will continue to keep an eye on that as we learn more in the months ahead. The most substantial cost increases between 2022 and 2024 were in the areas of compensation, which includes both wages and benefits, which increased on average between 7 and 9%, depending on the region. Facilities, as we talked about last month, was a significant increase over the 2 years, between 28 and 29%, depending on the region, as well as food, which was estimated to have increased, and this is using a federally supported national data source that is reflective of Massachusetts context, $1,000 per year annually. So in front of you now are our current child care financial assistance rates for center-based programs by region and by age group. And we have highlighted the ones that are furthest from the cost of care based on the updated 2024 cost models. So the darker shade of blue shows the Northeast infant and the Southeast infant and toddler rates, which are below 70% of, again, this is the updated, the 2024 cost of care. And the lighter blue, which is Western and Central Mass, infant and Western Central and Northeast toddler rates, which are between 70 and 80% of the 2024 cost of care. So this is just some contextual information, again, which informed the scenarios that we have developed for you, and so that you are aware. Moving on to family child care. Here are current family child care rates, again with rates shaded that are furthest from the updated cost of care. We should keep in mind, again, that the family child care cost model includes wages that are more aspirational for many providers. The current cost model includes an assumption of salary that is equivalent to a center-based director. You can see that the over age 2 rates are the furthest from the full cost of care, particularly in the Northeast and the Metro Boston metro regions. So I have said a lot. I think maybe I can pause here for a moment before we move into our proposed options, just to see if there are any questions or comments.
I would just say thank you. I mean, it's been just reflecting on this in my time, the evolution of this work, and grounding us just in. I have a deep appreciation for this decision to go from kind of market study to cost based. Like, there's a lot of work that's involved with that, and so I appreciate the team's work on kind of laying out for us to understand that, because setting rates is a really important obligation of this board. And so to understand the depth of work that has gone into shifting the system to this cost-based methodology is super helpful. So thank you.
Thank you. I know it's been a lot of work, and I also appreciate that you thanked everybody on the team. That's always a good idea.
I'm sure we forgot some people, so.
Okay. Any other comment? Okay.
I'll just kick off the next section. So we are not going to read the line item language in great detail, but what we've provided to you is 2 sets of line item language, one that was included in the final GAA budget, and it's kind of confusing because the bottom line is $65 million, but a lot of that was just annualizing the rates from last year. So we've highlighted the part of the at the bottom, which really indicates that for this fiscal year, we, in the final GAA, have $20 million that would be expended for subsidized early education and care and family child care providers. So that is the first amount of funding that we're working from. And then the closeout supplemental budget, which passed just recently, so we're often closing out FY24 later because there's costs that come in, included an additional $2.5 million. However, the language included in this line item limits these funds to be used only on center-based providers, so excludes family child care from this 2.5. So just when we think we're going to have a straightforward presentation to all of you, another level of complication, which is to say the $20 million is available for the entire system, and the team will talk a little bit about how we proportion that out by the percent of children served in each type of care, and then layering on this additional 2.5, which is available just for our center-based programs, and how we're proposing to use that. One other complicating factor I just wanted to mention is that for a very long time, as Amy mentioned, programs that were participating and receiving children through our Department of Children and Families, or our young parents, or families experiencing homelessness through our contracts, would receive a $24 a day per child add-on rate. And in our new contracts, we've moved away from this daily add-on. We delinked transportation, which used to be in that, to better reflect the actual cost of getting all the children here to CTI and other places across the Commonwealth. If you can't get them there, they can't get access to the services. So transportation has been a long-standing underfunded expense within the system, so delinking that was really important. The other thing we did was move away from this just daily add-on per child. Because what we wanted to do was provide budgets to programs so that they could, I don't know, fund a behavioral and a beautiful new behavior facility. Not that every program is able to do that, but we felt like doing it on a per child basis wasn't going to be giving us the resources or programs the resources to be able to buy the staff and the programmatic resources they would need. So we've moved away from this per child add-on and moved to a cost reimbursement contract. So every program is receiving that is participating gets a daily rate for for the children, and then they also get a separate contract for those support services. The reason I'm telling you that is because the rate language is a little bit outdated in the sense that it includes this daily add-on rate, which now no longer exists. So what you'll see in the proposals is that because these funds are FY25, we're in FY25, yeah. Yeah, right. Because this is FY25, these funds are effective July 1 of last year. So everything we implement will be retroactive. So we did have that add-on rate between July 1 and October 1 when the new contracts took place. So we are obligated to go back and adjust those rates based on this language just for that first quarter of the year. But we're no longer having those daily add-on rates, so they won't in the future, in this proposal going forward from October 1 forward, be considered in an increase. It's just the daily rate that we'll be proposing increases to. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Okay.
Amy, before we continue, can I just, I know Dr. Lucas has a
Sure.
question and comment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. I just had a clarification question around what was presented previously. I'm just bringing up my slides here so I can see them more clear. And focused on the family childcare, I think, Amy, you mentioned that the calculation is based off of an equivalent for family childcare towards center directors. Did I hear you correctly?
Yes.
And with that, is that a new calculation versus last November, or is that the same calculation that we're using? So I remember we had a back and forth with the IR researchers around how to calculate and understand like what is the compensation for someone doing the job of both director but also in classroom early educator.
Yeah, what I can say is that the cost models that our strategy and approach is based on today that are in our updated cost models. So for family childcare, the wage assumptions range from about $49,000 in Western Mass to about $61,000 in Metro Boston. So that is based on updated compensation salary data that EEC has. And again, sort of, I don't want to say anything that's not accurate, but I believe it's either the mean or the median.
But just to specifically answer your question, Dr. Lucas, it is exactly the same data that we presented in November.
Oh,
so
yes.
we did not,
Yes.
although part of the next phase has us looking more carefully at family childcare, and I think we're among the first in the country to actually create a cost model for family childcare. So your comments that we have spoken about with the researchers about how do we peg the right aspirational salary for a family child care provider who is director of family access, the property manager, the program director, the lead teacher, the HR director. The proxy we're using right now is the same that we presented in November and will use until we have something to replace it with, but recognizing that it's important for us to understand, not just trying to apply center-based concepts into family child care, but begin to really better understand sort of the family child care cost models. And we're just at the beginning of that work, I would say.
Gotcha. Okay. That's a helpful clarification. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Sorry for misunderstanding the question. And as I mentioned, even as part of the work over the next 6 months, the hope is to continue to, again, hear from the field and also make any refinements to the cost models, including potentially in this area. Okay, so.
Right, here we go.
We wanted to update our sort of strategy. So you may recall last year we also had a strategy. We have multiple sort of goals and guiding principles, some of which, many of which are similar to last year, but that are informing the options that we will be talking more specifically about in a couple minutes. So first of all, if it wasn't already obvious, using the cost-based methodology to and data and everything that we have learned about the cost of care to date to inform our approach to adjustments to child care financial assistance rates. We have particularly focused, again, on targeted rate increases for rates that are the furthest from the full cost of care. Second, important ongoing recognition that all programs face, as I said before, increasing operational costs. So you will see this addressed through using a portion of the funds available for the rate increase for a cost of living adjustment, although it is not able to be as high as it was last year based on the resources available. Third, distributing resources proportionally to where children who are receiving child care financial assistance are being served, both by program type or region. So there is an appendix slide way back in the deck, slide 48, I believe, that shows that 71% of children receiving child care financial assistance in October were in center-based programs for the purpose of child care financial assistance, and 21% were receiving care from family child care providers. And you can also see in that slide a breakdown by region. And finally, understanding again, and just keeping in mind that there are some important and differences in some of the assumptions in our center-based and family child care models. So you will hopefully see that reflected in the way that we have approached this work. And I'm going to turn it over to Ashley White to talk in more detail about all of that.
Thank you, Amy. And just want to start by seconding your acknowledgement of the whole team that contributed to the work that we're going to share in more detail now. That team is putting forth two options that we've explored for consideration for the board that both have a targeted rate increase based on the cost of care findings, and as well takes into consideration this distribution of children by setting type and program type, along with ensuring that we're also in compliance with line item language in the FY25 budget. So this slide summarizes the two options, and really the main difference between the two options are the across-the-board percentages, and relatedly, therefore, the extent to which we can increase rates farthest from the cost of care. So there's sort of a tension between spreading resources out across regions, across all rates, and dedicating those resources to targeted areas where we know that that rate is farthest from the cost of care. So you can see that the across the board or cost of living adjustment, as we have identified it here, is 1 or 1.5% for option 1 and 1.5 to 2% for option 2. And since option 1 has a slightly lower cost of living adjustment, we are able to increase certain rates more under that option, and we'll go into the specifics around that in a moment. I also just want to call out the reason why, which I think the commissioner sort of alluded to earlier, the cost of living adjustment for the FCCs is slightly lower than for center-based programs, and that's due to that additional $2.5 million that was included in the FY24 supplemental budget, which was specifically for center-based programs. And then before we go into details, I did also just want to note that the rate structure for family child care providers is subject to negotiation with the local 509 SEIU. So that's noted on some of the slides, but just wanted to include that here as well.
I also just want to note that in the appendix, we did run what the full amount would look like if we just applied it across the board, which would be about 2.5% across the board for all programs. we're not presenting that option for consideration to the board because we believe deeply that we should continue the work that we've started with this board last year to use the cost to inform, to adjust rates that have been traditionally or historically below. So the two options we're presenting continue to do this balance, but for your reference, there is a slide that would show you what it looked like if we applied all of the funds just across the board.
You mean to center-based and family child care the same?
Well, we would still need to put the 2.5 million extra to the centers, but so it's the first slide in the appendix. I don't know which number it is. Apologies, but that slide shows you what just an across the board approach that doesn't also have us targeting some rates that are really below the cost of care. So the two options we're presenting basically split between doing some adjustments to those that are disproportionately below the cost and doing something for everyone. And the two options sort of lean more heavily either into a little more across the board or a little more on adjusting and targeting to those rates that are below. Sorry.
No, thank you, Commissioner. Yeah.
So it's there for your review, we hope. But we hope these options will be of interest to the board.
And as the Commissioner also mentioned, in addition to the cost of living adjustments and those targeted cost of care adjustments, we're also suggesting a retroactive increase of 50 cents per day to that comprehensive services add-on rate for that period, July through September, which was before those new contracts went into effect. And Commissioner, I don't know if you wanted to say a word or two on that, or if you feel like you covered it.
If there's additional questions on sort of that small complication, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, we're good.
Great. So getting into the details now. So this slide shows more details about option one for center-based programs. And I know it's a lot of information in a table, so I'm going to just take a second to explain what we're looking at here. So you can see in the table that the bold is the actual, where would the actual rate would end up for each region and each age group. And then in the small text below, we're indicating what that new cost of care threshold would be given the increases. And then even in the tinier ink below is where it currently falls in terms of the cost of care. And the green is just meant to help sort of draw your eyes to the rates that are being impacted by these targeted cost of care adjustments. And just as I noted previously, right, all of these rates are going to get the cost of living adjustment, and then certain rates get this sort of additional targeted increase based on where they fell in terms of the cost of care. So you can see under option one, all of the new center-based rates would be at least 75% of the current cost of care, and some would actually be a bit higher than that in terms of the cost of care. And then you can also see that the rates farthest from the cost of care would see some of the largest increases, so going from 69% of cost of care to that new 75% cost of care threshold. You can also see here, we've indicated on the slide that the Northeast preschool rate also gets a targeted increase based on the cost of care as well. We know that this is something that was acknowledged, I think, by the board last year, and something that the agency has also been paying attention to and cares deeply about, and so have dedicated some additional resources to that Northeast preschool rate to address some of the equity concerns and to make sure that that rate is sort of comparable to the cost of care compared to the other preschool rates in other regions.
I will just note that with this option or also with the other option, in that specific case, we are making progress, but I don't think that rate is where we would hope it would be. So this is sort of going to be something that hopefully we can continuously pay attention to in future years, pending available resources.
So moving along, this is option one, and for family child care rates. And We've taken the same, approach as we had centers in terms of there being a cost of living adjustment plus these targeted cost of care adjustments. So everyone gets the COLA, and then certain rates get the targeted adjustment. So under option one, all family child care rates would be at least 67% of the cost of care. And then again, there are certain rates that would be higher than that. That's just setting the sort of minimum threshold. And again, the green cells indicate where those targeted adjustments are happening. And again, similar to how we concluded the last slide, you can see that the Northeast rate, which is currently actually the lowest percent cost of care for all of the FCC rates, is at 63% and would increase by 4 percentage points to 67% of the cost of care, which both brings it closer to the cost of care, but also closer to the cost of care for other regions. So brings it more in line with what we're seeing in other regions for those rates. Moving along quickly. So option two here. So again, same exact detail, but this is again option two for center-based programs. So you can see that option two includes a higher cost of living adjustment and therefore leaves less resources for the targeted cost of care adjustment. So for instance, unlike in option one, where center-based rates were brought up to 75% of the cost of care, in option two, we're doing a 2% cost of living adjustment and bringing the cost of care to 73%. So very similar rates that are actually being targeted. So the box actually maybe looks very similar to the previous slide, but the degree to which we are increasing those rates is where you'll see the difference. And again, the degree to which we're increasing them in option one is a bit higher. And again, making that same sort of adjustment on the Northeast preschool rate in this option as well. And lastly, this is option two for family child care rates. And so like center-based programs, this option includes a slightly higher across the board increase. And this option therefore brings the cost of care, the rates to a lower cost of care threshold at 66% as opposed to 67% in option one. And then again, you can see that the Northeast rate, which is currently at still the lowest percent cost of care, it's increasing by 3 percentage points as opposed to 4 percentage points in option one. Pause there, but keep going. This is essentially the same information, but trying to just visualize it a little bit differently for folks. I know maybe sometimes text boxes and tables can be a bit overwhelming, so trying to visualize this in a graph. And I'll just take a second to orient folks to what this information is telling us. So on the far left, the gray bar is the 2024 updated cost of care. And then you have the blue bar to the right, which is the current CCFA rate. And then in red is option one that I just discussed, and then in yellow gold is option two. So you can sort of visually compare the options across regions. And, I think we understand that, given existing appropriations, there's not too many differences between the options, but I think we also recognize that even small amounts of dollars can make a really meaningful difference in the lives of families and providers, and so felt it was important to just be sort of as transparent as possible in terms of where the resources and where the dollars are going. So again, as I've iterated a few times, all the proposals direct resources, portion of the resources to all of the center-based infant rates across regions, and option one just further increases for regions that are the farthest from the cost of care. And hopefully you can see that visually in this graph. We're doing the same thing, but for our toddler rates. So the previous was our center-based infant rates. These are our center-based toddler rates. Same visual, and again, directing resources across the board, but also option one is targeting increases in 3 regions that are farthest from the cost of care. You can see those minor differences across the regions here. And then lastly, focusing on the FCC over age 2 rates, because those are the ones that get the sort of targeted adjustments. Again, all FCC rates are going to get the across the board, and then these FCC over age 2 rates get some further increases in those 3 regions that are farthest from the cost of care. And then just concluding with this summary slide again, it's very similar to how we started, but slightly different information in some instances. And I'm happy to pause here and take reactions and comments and thoughts from the board. And we have one final slide next, but I'll pause here and we can have a little bit of discussion about the options that we've presented today.
Questions, comments from the board?
She said, "I get it," and that is a tribute to the team. As I said, I think they did a terrific job with a very complicated set of information to help you understand sort of what options there are and what impact they may have. We are, of course, open to other options that the board would like us to consider, other data or information you would like to present as you contemplate your decision and action again after the new year at an upcoming board meeting. I will say that I think it is the agency's position that we are slightly more in favor of option one. I do think either option is, because the funding is so spread out that we're not going to make as large an impact as we would like if we had additional resources. But because option one does more for us to lean into the cost of care and the research and try and adjust some of these inequities, we think it does both support programs who are struggling with the cost of care in these areas, as well as family access in those areas. So have a slight preference for option one, but would be comfortable with the board's action on either option, and again open to other options or additional data and information that you feel like you need to be able to make a decision.
No, first, that was kind of my question, so thank you. Which was, it feels like, it just felt, I was trying to gauge the assumption that I was making that option one does fall in line with kind of the philosophy we've taken about moving towards the cost of care over the last couple of years. So I think you answered that. Secondly, I would just say, as a visual learner, I like the chart. So thank you. It actually is really helpful to see, to just visualize kind of the impact that these decisions have, and every penny is meaningful. And so we're dealing with an obligation that's been given us to be thoughtful about, and you can see, again, I keep using this because I've been here for a little bit, but is the arc of this work and the thought that's been going into this and the order of operations in which you've approached this work, which we've talked about over a number of years, gives us a lot of really good stuff to think about as we move towards a vote after the first of the year at some point. So thank you for this. Carolyn.
Just very appreciative of the presentation because, like Linda said, I get it too. And I'm generally not a numbers person. That's why I went to law school. But this I could understand and follow. And I know that an incredible amount of work went into doing that for us. So just very appreciative and grateful. Thank you.
I think when I first saw it, instinctively I went to option two, but then I went into deeper study of it after your presentation. Just the fact that it accomplishes some of the goals that the department has with regards to meeting more regions, 75% of cost of care. I am in agreement that at least option one gets that accomplished. I think the difference between option one and two with regards to quantities or amounts for everybody are minimum, So, I'm still curious to see if the field has additional comments.
It's more of an equity versus equality issue,
Correct.
right? Which are not the same thing. Right.
Right. So, I feel like option one is also, it's more attractive now after this conversation we had. But again, I think, I'm hoping to vote as soon as possible.
No, and I think, we've been thoughtful about this idea, and you just commented on this, but I think it's really important that, the process as it relates to rates is that we do have a meeting to discuss it and give some time, a month or so or two before we vote on it, just so that, we do hear from folks in the field and we do hear from feedback, just to make sure that what we're doing is thoughtful. And one of the things that I appreciate is the continuous learning, like the idea that, we went back, if you look back last year, like we did have some comments about the Northeast and some of the rates, and there's some outliers, and it didn't feel like, and we're taking all those learnings from year to year, which I also think is just shows the mindset of the team as you're going into this work, which is also it's not an absolutes, right? It does take some targeted kind of approach as well. So I just appreciate that.
I think I agree with you. The repetition and the visuals really, I think, have led all us to really understand what's happening. So thank you.
So I know any other questions or comments? I know
We have one more, just sort of next
Yeah,
step
yeah, go ahead.
slide.
Oh, yes.
Unless there's more comments or thoughts on the options, we just share with you sort of what we do next, what happens next.
I don't know what to call this graphic. A road?
It's a road.
Obviously, we will be taking into account any additional input regarding the rate increase proposals and coming back to the board for a vote in early 2025. As I already mentioned, continuing to work with AIR to publish a report that summarizes this work that we have done together so far this year, and further work that we want to do on refining and continuing to make the cost models even better through the remainder of fiscal year 25. And I think I mentioned some of the priorities. We actually have a long list of priorities, but are trying to prioritize the priorities over the next 6 months or so. We hope to further leverage the cost models to inform strategic investments and decisions to support program and workforce stability, quality, and sustainability through the rest of this fiscal year and beyond. And, I think committed to continuing to update and expand and make even better this work into future years. So that's all we have today.
And I'll just conclude by saying that we will use the time between now and when we bring this back for a vote to the board to hear from members of the field. I'm sure you may also hear from some of them, so we'll have an opportunity to summarize that and also continue to consult with SEIU 509 that represents our family child care providers on the options for implementation. So the time between now and when the board takes action will give us time for those important process pieces.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Excellent work. Really grateful for the team and the team that stands behind you in this. So well done.
And with that, I think we are at the end of our agenda. I just want to express, and where I began, with my gratitude to the team here at CTI for your hospitality and not just the beautiful facility, but what you're doing inside this facility, which you can see and feel in every room we went into in our tour. And thank you. Please extend our gratitude to the team of people that stand behind you as well and doing what you do every day. Grateful. I wish everyone a happy holiday, happy New Year to everybody. We will be back in Boston in January. And with that, I'd make a motion to adjourn. Can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.